friends, how are you? Thank you for being with me today. My name is Sarah, and on my channel I talk about books and reading. Today I'm doing my July reading wrap-up where I cover everything I read during July. The first book I didn't finish it until July 13th, which is kind of odd. It usually takes me only 2 or 3 days to get through a book, and this one just took longer. This one and the next one, they just took a little longer. The first one I read in July was Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Lori Gottlieb. And she is a psychologist, and the book is about her practice and her own work with when she went to a psychologist for therapy for herself. And she's fictionalized all the names and some of the accounts so that none of their characters can be traced back to the people that inspired them. But it's still not really a fiction book. It's more like reporting or something. I thought it was really good. Therapy has become such a big part of modern life, and there are good reasons for that. And she really illustrates, I think is the best word for it. She illustrates why it can be helpful to go to therapy with someone who's qualified and trained to give therapy. Yeah, I recommend it. It was a good book. The next one I listened to was The Night Circus, and I finished that on the 14th. I had a strange reaction to this book. It was well written. It was engaging. The scene setting was very, it really immersed you in the scenes. And yet, I think partly because I listened and partly because I don't keep up with numbers very well, it took me a while to realize that the author was going back and forth between different time periods, and that there were different timelines interweaving. And at the beginning of each chapter there's a date for when the chapter takes place, but like I said, I don't hold numbers in my head well. So if I'd been reading a hard copy, it would have been a lot easier to flip back a few pages and see, oh, the previous chapter happened at a different time and this one's happening before that one actually happened. So for me, I got a little confused. She did this in The Starless Sea as well. Her resolution is different. And it's probably not going to be satisfying to everyone. I'm not sure if I was satisfied with it. I'm not sure I wasn't. I just kind of have ambivalent, mixed feelings about that. Moving on, the next book that I read, I actually read it on my phone. I borrowed a copy from my library, and that was The Ivies by Alexa Dunn, and I've already reviewed this. I'll put a link in the description. I loved it. I love murder mysteries, and it was a successful murder mystery, and what's not to love? The next one I read, I also read on my phone. I remembered that several years ago, I had downloaded as many free books as I could find on my Kindle. I had, put them into my Kindle library, and I thought, well, why don't I read some of those and see what's there? So the first one I opened up was called Alfie and Everybody, and I'll put it in the link down below. I can't off the top of my head remember the author's name. I did not love this. There were sections of it that were funny, but overall it was not pleasant to read. There was a lot of child abuse, there was a lot of physical abuse, a lot of emotional abuse, and I felt like the author wrote 2 different books and smashed them together. They are about all the same characters, but the first half of the book is one person telling his childhood and then kind of speeding through his adolescence, his teenage years, and his adult years to bring him up to where he's in his 50s. And then the second half, he goes and kind of gathers up the rest of his family and they reconnect. And it felt like those were 2 different things. So I didn't think it was a successful book, in spite of the fact that the writing, like the on the micro level, the writing was good. You know, the grammar was good, the spelling was fine, and it flowed from one sentence to the next. I just didn't like the whole book. The next thing, I listened to The Art of War by Sun Tzu. No, I probably didn't pronounce that right. And I don't know how to rate a book like that. It's an ancient manual on warfare, on how to think about your enemy, on classifications of different kind of ground you can find your army on, and what to do if you're in this kind of ground and your enemy does X, Y, or Z thing. How do you classify that? I don't know. I understand that a lot of people like to use that kind of as a manual for life, but I personally do not like to think of life as a war. I like to think of life as being more collaborative than that. So, it was what it was. I'm glad I read it. I'm glad I listened to it. Now I can say I have. Now I have an idea what it's all about. People talk about it, and now I know what they're talking about. The next one I read was The Silent Patient. And this one, and maybe you should talk to someone, came from my local Buy Nothing group. And this one has gotten a lot of talk. People are talking about it, people love it or they hate it. I felt kind of meh about it. When I first started reading, I realized that there were a lot of allusions to Greek mythology, and a lot of them were allusions I'm not familiar with, or not familiar enough with. And so I went searching. Who was Alcestis? Oh yeah, I know who Diomedes was. I should know that. I studied the Iliad twice. But how do they come together? And it was interesting that all these characters are named things that are very suggestive. The woman who is accused of killing her husband is named Alicia, but she paints a picture of herself where she compares herself to Alcestis, or Alcestis, I know. And then she ends up in it's not a prison, but it's a healthcare facility for people who have committed crimes because of mental illness. And the one of the head doctors over this place is Dr. Diomedes. And then this therapist who narrates the story is named Theo. I don't remember, I think his last name was Faber, but I didn't draw any connection there. There's another person there, a psychiatrist, I believe, named Christian West. So a lot of these names are very suggestive. I thought that was interesting. In the end, it was fine. It was well written. It just wasn't a book that grabbed me and made me think, oh, I'm so glad I read this. And I'm not sorry I read it either. It was a book I read. The next one, I listened to Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. And yes, I have lots of thoughts about that. I'm planning to do a review video on that. Just before I do that, without getting too much into it, let me say that this book it deals with some very, very tough subjects, and in a way that people disagree about what Conrad meant, what his message was. And so if you are triggered by racism, by the N-word, by colonialism, by corporatism, by violence, violent death, disturbing illness before we knew about germ therapy and had our modern medicine, and mutilation of corpses, those are the ones I can think of. There may be more. Maybe don't read this book. It may not be for you. Then the next book I listened to was the Mysterious Efferent Styles, which is number 1 of the Hercule Poirot series. I'm pretty sure I've read this before. I read so much Agatha Christie as a teen that they all kind of run together. There are a few that stand out. There's the one where the narrator did it. There's the one where they all did it. There's the one where a child did it. And there are a few others that kind of stand out because they have allusions that I remember, or I read them again and watched a movie or something like that. This one, I think I've probably read it, but I did not remember it. I didn't remember it enough to say, oh yeah, I know who did it. And Christie's really good at actually pointing the finger at everyone. A lot of mystery writers point the finger at everyone except the person who did it, and sometimes that's how you can tell. Oh, it's so and so because that's the one person the writer hasn't tried to make me think was the murderer. But Christie doesn't do that. She points her finger at absolutely everyone, and it was Agatha Christie. She's a queen for a reason. So it was good. And last, sneaking in just under the wire, I finished this July 31st around, 8, 9 o'clock, something like that in the evening, was Anne Perry's Southampton Row. Another murder mystery set in Victorian London. And this one is at least as much about political intrigue as it is about murder. I can't remember if he's Inspector Pitt, whatever. Mr. Pitt is her detective. And, it was, I thought it was a little better than most of the other Anne Perrys I've read. It was another murder mystery that did what it intended to do. So, tell me about your July reading. What have you read? What have you enjoyed? Have you read any of the books that I read this last month? And what did you think of them? Are you interested in reading some of them? It looks like I read 9 books in July, which is fine. You guys have a really, really great day. Thank you for being here. Bye.